Hello everyone, this is part 9 of What If Naruto Was a Prodigy and in the Anbu, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto had failed. The inhabitants of the Land of Fire had been killed, one after the other, again and again, before his very eyes. The blood of dozens, hundreds of innocent men, women and children stained the cratered, blackened grounds. The last civilian, the daughter of the Fire Lord himself, hung limply from a cross, her hands and feet nailed into the wood and her body bound by an unknown sealing technique. Naruto couldn't get her free, and his duty meant that none of them could retreat without her. And his teammates were wounded and dying. There had been 6 in Team Cage. Hyuga Daichi, codenamed Crow 3, who lay on the ground, his short-cropped black hair stained with mud and his once brilliant white eyes dim and gray. Status: incapacitated. Yamanaka Yuka, codenamed Snake 5, who knelt down in the muck, both hands clasped to the side of her head. Her mouth was moving endlessly, her eyes unfocused behind her mask. Status: incapacitated. Toa, with a terrible wound gushing from his elbow, a thin trickle of blood leaking from the side of his mask. Toa, who had somehow been linked with the enemy command, a technique that seemingly transferred any injuries that Hiden suffered onto himself. Toa, who held a hand to his chest as he toppled face first to the ground. Status: incapacitated. Now they were 3. Komaki had fended off Hiden's cultists for the time being as she guarded the wounded, and Cage stood before Hiden, his dull black blade punctured through the slick, silver-haired man's chest. Naruto stood next to him, the palm of his hand bleeding as he gripped Cage's blade. For a moment, the two Anbu froze as Hiden shuddered in pleasure. Then, Hiden's face twitched and a look of rage flashed over it. Naruto was panting as he released his grip on the blade. He had just managed to drag it down at the last second, lowering the thrust from a fatal stab to the heart to a less critical blow to the chest. He thought he had missed most of the vital organs, but it was hard to tell with Hiden, with his blackened skin and abnormally protruding bones. Cage's head turned back to Hiden and his body language screamed his sudden understanding of what was happening. The normally stoic Jonin paused for a fraction of a second, and was almost skewered as a rage-filled Hiden brought his scythe down upon him. Both Naruto and Cage jumped back, narrowly avoiding the attack. Cage's blade remained in Hiden, who looked furious. "You fuckers," he growled. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "Who the fuck do you think you are, interrupting my ritual like that? I'll burn you alive, heretics." Naruto glared at him furiously, his chakra surging. His tenketsu were burning, his limbs were strangely light and his tongue felt like he had licked a lightning release technique. He quickly looked at his captain and saw Cage was suddenly looking unsure, hesitant, even. The Anbu captain's dull black blade was still lodged in Hiden's body, a wound that had apparently been transferred over to Toa. Hiden's body, his charcoal black skin and thickened, protruding bones began to contort as he began to revert back to normal, and the bloodied symbol by his feet was shimmering hazily, evaporating into nothingness. "Jashin will be fed today," Hiden promised. His tongue came out and he licked his side again, lapping at the smear of dull crimson liquid like a dog lapped at a drink. His skin, which had been fading, grew dark again and his bones surged out unnaturally. Naruto's eyes widened as Hiden's body exploded in a shower of blood once more, the crimson rivets dripping to the ground and forming the eerie symbol of the priest's dark religion. His thoughts were moving too fast to vocalize them, but his heart leapt as the young Anbu began to draw conclusions on Hiden's ability. His fingers blurred and he spoke to Cage in hand code. Formation the 3rd of April 10. Formations 3s were offensive. -4 signaled a distraction, and -10 was the time limit. Cage was to provide a quick distraction for no more than 10 seconds before retreating, and to his credit, the Anbu captain did exactly that. He darted forward, bashing away a swipe of Hiden's side with the back of his metal gauntlets, and breaking through the priest's openings. Naruto watched furtively even as he made hand seals as Cage neatly plucked his blade from out of Hiden's chest, pulling it out without even cutting a hair on the silver-haired man's chest, and used it to block a downward thrust of the deadly spear. The blonde's eyes watched Hiden's footwork as he molded the last of his chakra and sprinted forward. As Cage swiped at Hiden's side and spear, a frantic dance of sparks and clangs, Naruto darted underneath the captain's furious attack and took a deep breath. Heat surged from the tenketsu in his throat as he infused his saliva with water elemental chakra, and Naruto spat out water. Water release. Crossing streams technique. It was wasteful and shoddy, and the water came out in great big goblets instead of a thin, slicing technique, but that was exactly what Naruto had wanted. Fresh, clean water exploded around them and Hidden grunted as it pushed at him. Kage drew back as Naruto held his fingers at his lips, blowing the water onto Hidden and causing the priest to splutter. In effect, it was less of a dangerous technique and more of something you'd use to water your gardens, but it did the job, and Naruto withdrew back to Kage's side. Hidden shook his head furiously, droplets of water flying through the air. He looked furious, and his body began revert back to normal. Naruto couldn't help the vicious smirk that crossed his face. The water had washed away the markings on the ground, and Naruto had been extra careful to target Hidden's side, washing away the last of Toa's blood. His fingers blurred as he passed on his suspicions to the others. Technique requirements: blood of enemy, symbol, changes, avoid injury. Kage's fingers blurred back. Defensive formation, prioritize squad health. Kage and Naruto withdrew, away from Hidden and towards Komaki. Together, the three Anbu took a tri-pronged formation around their fallen comrades. Naruto stood there with the last of his weapons, a handful of shuriken that was squeezed between his fingers, and awaited his orders. His mind was whirring, considering the possibilities of attacking or retreating. He took a deep breath and forced his emotions down, doing his best to calm himself. Attacking was not looking like a favorable option at the moment, yet retreat would ensure the death of the Fire Lord's daughter, and he didn't think that even the Hokage could protect him from the repercussions of that. In the end, it wasn't his decision, and so he waited for orders. Around them, the other priests had pulled themselves together, some of them quite literally, and were yelling and heckling loudly. They swore and cursed and jeered at them as Hidden strode forward, his grin even more manic than it had been before. That was a mistake, he said tightly. Jashin-sama does not like being interrupted like that. He's angry, Hidden's. He's very angry. He righted his side over his shoulders. None of the Anbu responded. Naruto's heart beat furiously, his eyes flickering to his right to take in Yuka's motionless form. There had been some rustling from behind him, probably from Toa, but it had stopped and he didn't want to know what that had meant. It was at that moment that Naruto suddenly understood the dilemma of the White Fang all of those years ago. The rise and fall of the S-ranked prodigy of the Hitaki family was perhaps the most well-known and debated case study in all of Konoha, and even to this day there hadn't been a single definite conclusion of what the man should have done. He had been caught between a rock and a hard place, just like Team Kage was at that very moment. Naruto felt his tattoo itch as it activated, and he kept his eyes on the enemy even as he awaited his orders. Then, one of the acolytes screamed in agony from behind him and he twitched at the unexpected sound. Naruto resisted the urge to look behind him, gripping the shuriken tightly. But then another acolyte screamed. There was a gurgling, tearing noise and Naruto felt the air behind him move. He neatly sidestepped, delivering a fistful of shuriken onto the oncoming object, and his hands flashed in preparation of a technique, but his tattoo flared and he froze. The object tumbled to the ground, revealing itself to be half a body or what was left of it. His or head, for it was hard to tell, skin had completely shriveled up, wrapping around the skull. Parts of the now brittle skin had torn, revealing bone that looked like it had been bleached white. All that remained of the acolyte was a desiccated corpse. Hidden was staring over him now, his features marred with his ever-present rage. Who the fuck are you? He snarled. From the corner of his eye, Naruto saw somebody enter the field and he stifled his surprise. He hadn't even felt them coming. Without breaking formation, he waited tensely as the figures moved into his field of view. There were two of them, with long, dark black cloaks marked with red spirals and swirls almost like clouds. They wore large conical straw hats, blocking their faces from view, but one was a large, burly figure while the other was more slender, barely reaching the other's shoulder. The two cloaked figures seemed to ignore him, standing amongst the debris and devastation that the fight between the cultists and the Anbu had left. They came off as unconcerned and Naruto resisted the urge to squirm. Something about them set his danger senses off. It was similar to how the Hokage felt at times. He couldn't actually detect anything, but there was something lingering around him that set all of his instincts off. The slender one spoke first, revealing itself to be a female. Rude, she scoffed hoarsely. Her voice sounded throaty and coarse. Hurry up. I've got things to do. Her partner shifted his head to look down at her. In doing so, he revealed a set of bright glowing green eyes. Shut up, bitch, he commanded gruffly. This is more important than your earnings. The female chuckled without any humor, and from what Naruto could glimpse underneath his hat, she seemed to be smiling nastily. I don't like that word, she rebutted darkly. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and her partner shifted on his spot, angling his body as if he expected an attack. I said shut up, the larger one ordered again. His eyes showed no emotion whatsoever. I'm sick of your bitching, woman. Don't make me make you be quiet. The pair seemed oblivious to what was happening around them. Hidden stared at him, agape with disbelief and growing rage, while the acolytes were spreading themselves around them. One of them, a bald, wrinkled and hunched man, gripped a jagged, crude cleaver and launched himself at the pair with a wild whoop. The woman seemed to twitch and her arm flashed forward. She met the acolyte's charge with a single palm thrust to the face, definitely with enough force to break his nose. But, the moment she touched him, the air shimmered around her hazily and the man screamed in pure agony. Before his eyes, Naruto watched as the cultist shriveled up almost instantly and dropped to the ground with a thud. The woman lowered her hand and seemed to shoot a look at her partner. One of these days, she promised darkly. I'm looking forward to it, the burly man said with a quiet, dangerous chuckle. Oi, I asked you a fucking question, you heretics. Hidden screamed maniacally. Oh, the burly figure cocked his head. All Naruto could see were the glowing green eyes from behind his hat as they surveyed Hidden with interest. Let me ask you a question. Are you the one who murdered Lord Satu and his retinue? What if I am? Hidden countered. He licked his lips furtively and gave his side a swing. What will you do about it, bitch? The burly figure chuckled and turned his head to his partner. That is an annoying name, isn't it? He said with some humor. The woman was still underneath her straw hat, and the man turned back to Hidden. If you are, then I'm going to kill you. Hidden began chuckling as Naruto felt Cage stir. Identify. Cage's voice barked out. The dark-cloaked figures finally seemed to notice them, and the biggest one turned to face them. Naruto stared into those glowing green eyes and couldn't help but gulp. There was something lurking within him that made him feel very small and very weak. Shut up, worm, the man growled at them. Know your place. This bounty is mine. Naruto tensed up, ready to defend in case the other man attacked, but at that moment the acolytes charged at him, hollering and screaming madly. What followed made the Anbu look like a genin. The woman met the charge with hand-to-hand combat. It was a strange style that he hadn't seen before, one that emphasized palm strikes and spinning kicks that almost made it look reminiscent of the gentle fist. Yet, every palm strike met with the same grisly result, and men and women dropped, screaming in agony as their skin shriveled and dried up on the spot. Within a matter of moments, the woman had taken out the majority of the cultists with a single strike. Two of them had bypassed her and made their way for the man. One held a giant bastard sword, the other held a mace. The burly man didn't even twitch as something glinted from underneath his cloak, and then suddenly the two men were impaled on some kind of wire. It tore through the cultists like razor-sharp wire, digging and diving into them and literally pulling them apart from the seams. Then, almost an instant later, the wires retracted back to the cloak and the splattered remains of the cultists dropped to the ground with a gruesome thud. In the time that it had taken both of them to dispose of the enemy, Naruto wouldn't have even finished a technique. Hidden was roaring with laughter now, a high-pitched manic sound that grated on Naruto's nerves. He would have been more annoyed by it, had not the woman of the dark cloak pair adjusted her hat. For a split second, Naruto saw her features, dark hair, bleached bangs and pupils, brown eyes. His mind whirred the devastation of her techniques, her features, and suddenly he knew exactly who was standing in front of him. Naruto didn't move an inch. He continued breathing normally, focusing on his stance and making sure that he hadn't given anything away. He passed a message on to Cage, breathing quickly, and then tried his best to make sure that they all got out of his alive. He stepped forward, intentionally drawing the attention of the red-swirled cloaked man and woman. You are the bounty hunters that the Fire Lord contacted, right? Naruto asked. The man didn't make a sound, but the young blonde Anbu got the sense that he was annoyed. He continued on, almost desperately. You will make the Fire Lord very happy by delivering this man's head, but I know how you can double your reward money. Now the man's attention was fully upon him, and Naruto was glad for his mask as those soulless green eyes bore into him. The woman on the hill, Naruto gestured. She's the Fire Lord's daughter. She's trapped by a sealing technique. Break the technique and we'll take her back to her father. We'll tell the Fire Lord what you did and he'll be sure to reward you for it. The man gazed down at Naruto for what seemed like an eternity. Then, at long last, he shifted and something like amusement flickered in those odd eyes. Naruto released the breath he hadn't known he was holding as the man chuckled lowly. How amusing, he said gruffly. What a smart little worm you are. Very well, I'll accept your little deal, but, all amusement fled his tone. I want triple the amount specified. You will convey this to the Fire Lord. Naruto nodded quickly. You're going to let them go. The woman sounded faintly amused. I'd say you're growing a heart, but, well, she trailed off, perhaps an inside joke that Naruto did not understand. He doesn't like it when we leave witnesses, though. For the amount we'll get, I'm sure he'll put up with it, the man responded. Besides, he jerked his head at the crucified girl at the top of the mound. Do you want to carry her back to the capital? The woman made an odd noise. Oi, baby, she called, gesturing at Naruto. Come with me. Hey, what the fuck do you think? Hiden was cut off mid-rant as streams of dirty grey wires tore into him, wrenching him apart by the seams. He formed back together almost as quickly as he was torn apart, and the burly bounty hunter seemed to find this amusing. The woman beckoned Naruto again and disappeared in a flash of movement. Naruto eyed Kage, who nodded, and disappeared in a body flicker. He reappeared at the top of the mound, by the side of the princess and a respectful distance away from the red and black cloaked bounty hunter. The woman seemed somewhat annoyed as she gazed upon the bloodied and broken form of the princess. Naruto watched her anxiously as she knelt down, her back towards Naruto as if she had nothing to fear, and he knew that she truly didn't. The air around her thickened and shimmered, a hazy aura surrounded her, and a sudden squealing noise filled the air, like metal bending. There was a thud and a splutter and the woman stood up, brushing her hands on her cloak. Off you go, baby, the woman said mockingly. Take your little prize and run away like a good boy. Her mocking tone did absolutely nothing to Naruto, and he bowed gratefully. He carefully pulled out the nails pinning the princess to the cross and took her in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and remained motionless and unresponsive as Naruto used the body flicker to reappear by Kage's side. Komaki had Toa in her arms while Kage had the still forms of Yuka and Daichi on either shoulder. Now leave, the large, unknown man ordered roughly. He turned his head, even as he tore Hiden apart again, and soulless green eyes bore into Naruto. And tell the Fire Lord what I've done here. I'm expecting my reward. Naruto nodded grimly. Bye-bye, little baby. The woman called out mockingly. The desiccated corpses around them were beginning to pull themselves together in a series of great screams and moans of pain and pleasure. The woman stomped on the face of one as the man hurled Hiden away with his wires, his fingers flexing. That was the last thing Naruto saw before Team Kage blurred away from the clearing, a full retreat in progress. The trip back to Konoha was a bit of a blur for Naruto. While his chakra reserves were fine as per usual for a demon host and a member of the Uzumaki clan, his mind and body were fatigued and exhausted. Team Kage jumped from one tree to another, fleeing the bounty hunters and the cultists as fast as they could in their condition. Each jump brought a flare of pain in Naruto's body, his overworked Tenketsu straining to keep up the pace. Team Kage stopped only once, almost 30 minutes away from the battlefield, to assess the condition of the wounded. Naruto lowered the daughter of the Fire Lord gently down to the ground, and examined her wounds as Komaki and Kage did the same for the remainder of Team Kage. The princess had deep, jagged puncture wounds in her hands and feet, courtesy of the nails that had pinned her to the wooden cross, and there were a series of lacerations on her back, as if she had been whipped. She might have been an attractive girl once, beautiful even, but it was hard to tell with the swelling and bruising around her face. She seemed to have been worked over with some kind of blunt instrument, and her nose was broken, her eye socket puffed up and swollen, and several teeth missing from behind her bloodied, chapped lips. Naruto reached for his medical kit for his bandages. He only carried the basics, but they were enough to carefully wrap the girl's hands, feet and head, and there was a small tube of ointment that he carefully applied to her back before patching it up with gauze. Finally, he jabbed the girl in the arm with a disposable needle and injected her with a small, but potent, dose of painkillers. Some of the tension fled the girl's unconscious form and she seemed to relax in her sleep. Naruto packed up his medical kit and stood up. Komaki's hands were glowing with a flickering green light and there were a pile of bloodied bandages next to her as she finished her battlefield surgery on Toa. Cage stood next to her, carefully swabbing and wrapping at the great stab wound in Toa's chest. Naruto clenched his fists tightly but hung back, knowing that there really wasn't much he could contribute. Finally, Komaki dropped her head, looking exhausted, and the light faded away. Toa's chest continued to rise up and down, but his skin was pale and clammy, and Naruto could hear a wet rattle with every breath that the other Anbu operative took. Summoning technique. With a flare of chakra, and with his tenketsu burning, Naruto summoned a trio of man-sized gorillas. With surprisingly gentle hands, the summons carefully picked up the wounded, and the rest of Team Cage climbed onto their backs. Then they were off again, and Naruto rested his head upon the soft, furry back of his summons and rested his eyes for a moment. The wind rushed in his hair and the birds chirped around them, the sun beating down on their forms. All in all, it was a beautiful day. It took hours to reach Konoha and the sun was beginning to set. Komaki, Cage and Naruto had taken turns in taking point. At some point, the group had rendezvoused with a patrolling Anbu squad and his tattoo flared up as Cage had delivered priority 1 orders. They didn't slow down at all and, now with an escort, the 8 summons bounded through the trees and approached the walls of Konoha. Naruto was alert and somewhat rested as the Anbu darted past the main gates and dropped onto the ground. And then they were surrounded. An entire platoon of white-masked Anbu descended upon them, warned beforehand of their impending arrival. They formed a perimeter, taking spots on top of buildings and around Team Sigma. Anbu medical crew, Upsilon, approached them, and Naruto carefully passed over the Fire Lord's daughter. 4 of the medical crew disappeared as soon as they had her, taking at least half of the Anbu with them. The rest converged on Toa, Daichi and Yuka. Naruto spotted 3 of them above Toa, hands and palms glowing green as they attended him. The rest were examining Yuka and Daichi, making preparations to move out. He was exhausted and tired, both mentally and physically, and Naruto collapsed to the ground. The stone was cool to the touch and he gazed up at the horizon, watching as the sun set while the Anbu scurried all around him. They broke ranks as a trio of Hyuga, led by clan head Hyashi, arrived to take Daichi. Moments later, Yamanaka Inoiki had arrived, looking grim, and he directed the Anbu to take Yuka to the Yamanaka Run mental health ward. There was a hand on his shoulder and Naruto jerked, looking up. Come, Cage ordered, not unkindly. We need to debrief. Naruto steeled himself and nodded. The sun had gone down by the time the debrief was over and Konoha twinkled in the night. After a quick shower, Naruto had changed and stood as still as a statue behind the Hokage's right shoulder, who sat at his desk. Sarutobi's eyes were closed and he rested his chin upon his wrinkled hands. Standing at the Hokage's left was the captain of ANBU's Alpha Platoon, Kitsune, and lining the perimeter of the office was Konoha's most elite Anbu teams, Alpha Teams 1 and 2, while the rest of the platoon had taken position outside. The atmosphere of the Hokage's office was tense, but Naruto was barely aware of it. All he wanted to do was sleep. The door opened and the Fire Lord strode in, flanked by 3 of the 12 guardians. Sarutobi opened his eyes and watched stonily as the Fire Lord came and took a seat beside him, the members of the 12 guardians taking point behind him. They waited, and 5 maybe 10 minutes passed. Then the doors opened again and a small contingent of Anbu strode in, escorting their visitor. The tall, thin and pasty man surveyed the room with his pinkish-red eyes, and Naruto could see him somewhat tense. The man ran a hand through his lank, white hair. Good evening, Hokage-sama, Damaso-sama, he greeted nervously, in a thin reedy voice. The Hokage and the Fire Lord were silent and Naruto stirred. Sit down, Ambassador Basho, he ordered quietly. Basho smiled nervously. I don't understand, he began. Sit down. Naruto's voice dripped with ice. Basho took a deep breath and silently took the proffered seat. He tugged at his formal robes, loosening the collar and drawing himself up. Ambassador, the Hokage's voice was quiet but no less firm for it. Are you aware of the events that have occurred within Fire Country in the past 24 hours? Basho cocked his head in thought. I am not, Hokage-sama, he answered neutrally. Within the past week, Fire Country has come under attack, Sarutobi continued. There has been much loss of life, civilian and shinobi. Entire villages have been ravaged. The Fire Lord's own daughter was captured and tortured. The Hokage fell silent and the ambassador cleared his throat. Daimyo-sama, you have my sincerest sympathies, Basho offered firmly. Please, if there is anything that my people can do, then please let us know. The Fire Lord stayed quiet, content to idly fan himself, and Sarutobi spoke up again. There is one thing you could provide for us, Sarutobi murmured. He took his chin off of his hands and straightened his shoulders. You could tell us why you attacked us, and perhaps offer a reason why we should not destroy you. Basho's face tightened. I'm afraid I don't understand, he said quietly. The land of hot springs has not attacked, nor have plans to attack, the land of fire. On the contrary, Sarutobi's voice was light, you already have. He picked up a folder and carelessly slid it over the table. Basho picked it up and opened it up. Almost immediately, his face flushed and his mouth parted open in shock and dismay. As the ambassador surveyed the photos and action reports, the Hokage continued. The cult of Jashin, he declared, and the name reverberated through the room. Naruto repressed a shudder. It's a religion that began in the heart of the land of frost. Innocuous at first, it spread to the land of hot springs almost 15 years ago, and your lord was seduced by the power and possibilities that it offered. Your hidden village adopted it as your official doctrine, and within a year the religion had almost 10,000 conscripts. Men and women came from all fields of life to join your village. He smiled thinly. At one point you had an army to rival that of one of the Great Five. Basho was trembling, pale and shaky. But then the true nature of Jashinism's depravities came to light when your forces invaded the land of frost, Sarutobi continued. Your hidden village declared war and attacked. The cult led a crusade against the land of frost, massacring anybody who came in their path, right up to the capital. Indeed, Basho said quietly. He closed the folder and placed it on the desk. It's a terrible stain on our history, a time where reason and logic were displaced for brutal fanaticism. Had the Third Reikage not intervened, he took down 10,000 of your people to secure the capital of the land of frost, at the cost of his own life, Sarutobi murmured. Before he died, he blunted the spear of your attack and sent your forces scattering. The land of lightning was quick to hunt down and destroy this cult, and I honestly believed that they had been successful. Alas, it seems that the land of hot springs has begun a second crusade. A crusade against us, the Fire Lord broke in, his thin, reedy voice rather light. His face was mostly hidden by his fan. No, Basho shook his head empathetically. Never. A member of your former hidden village, a spokesperson of your once national religion, has shed the blood on our lands, Sarutobi thundered. His voice rose, and the windows shuddered. Naruto and Kitsune were motionless behind him, and Basho trembled, eyes frantically darting around to the Anbu that surrounded the office. I assure you, we made no such plans. But you knew they were coming, the Fire Lord declared. It was not a question, and he laughed rather hollowly. Oh yes, you knew they were coming. Why else would you petition us to place a garrison along your borders? The Hokage asked. He leaned back in his chair, and eyed Basho stonily. What is happening in your lands? Basho took a deep breath. There has been a resurgence of the cult in recent months, he admitted quietly. It's all under control, he quickly added. We are working on suppressing it as I speak. Under control. The Fire Lord repeated, and giggled. He fanned himself even harder than ever. Oh yes, under control indeed. The third Hokage merely gave a pointed look at the manila folder on his desk, and Basho exhaled noisily. He rubbed his eyes, shaking his head loosely. At the present time, however, I am happy to inform you that Konoha will take your mission request, Sarutobi continued. Kitsune. Basho jerked as if struck, and Kitsune took a step forward. Ambassador, meet Kitsune, Sarutobi introduced rather pleasantly. Kitsune is the esteemed captain of Konoha's combat platoon Alpha. He will be your contact for the duration of this mission. I'm afraid I don't understand, Basho murmured. As per your request, we will be reinforcing the border between our lands with a garrison of our shinobi, the Hokage elaborated. And Kitsune here will lead a platoon of our finest Anbu into your lands to root out the remnants of this little cult. We will find them, Ambassador, and we will end them. You can't. A sudden crack blasted through the room and Basho jerked. His frantic eyes darted about until they came to rest upon the Fire Lord, who held the two parts of his broken fan in his hands. Very gingerly, the Fire Lord placed the broken parts on the Hokage's desk, reached into his robes and pulled out another fan. He snapped it open and began waving himself again. Basho sagged, as if defeated. Kitsune, Sarutobi ordered quietly. You will deploy your squadron tonight and take your men into the heart of the land of hot springs. You will root out members of the cult of Jashan from all corners of that land. Any man, woman and child associated with the cult are to be exterminated. Those who give shelter to the cult and allow them to commit their vile deeds are to be made examples of. Those who hinder your work are to be dealt with. The Hokage's eyes grew flinty and his voice lowered until it was barely a whisper. You are authorized, if needed, to implement a scorched earth policy if needed. Understood. Kitsune's voice was cool and collected. It was almost impossible to determine the man's age from underneath his mask. Kumo will not take this lightly, Basho tried to warn. They will see it as an attempt to annex one of their border countries, I will speak to the Lightning Lord. The Fire Lord waved it off. He stood up, brushing his hands on his robes. You'll have to excuse me now, my daughter is gravely hurt, and I wish to be by her side. Basho clambered out of his seat, while the Hokage rose more smoothly. They bowed towards the Fire Lord as he left, the members of the 12 Guardians trailing behind him. A few moments later, Basho also left a few moments later, staggering out as if had taken a blow to the head. The office descended into silence as Sarutobi stared into the flickering fireplace. Then, he snapped his fingers. Dismissed. The Anbu operatives within the room disappeared in a blur of movement, leaving Sarutobi and Naruto alone. Naruto stood there silently as the Hokage shuffled some papers. He picked up a fountain pen, signed his name and rolled one of the papers into a scroll. After tying it with a blue ribbon, the Hokage placed it in one of the trays on his desk and sighed. The sound echoed in the room. Naruto, Sarutobi said wearily. Please, sit. Naruto obeyed, taking a seat on the other side of the table. Let us talk, the Hokage murmured. Naruto nodded and took his mask off. Although there was no difference in his line of vision, Naruto felt strangely exposed. The light of the flickering fireplace seemed harsh on his eyes, and he yearned for the shadows of anonymity once again, where nobody could see what he was feeling. Sarutobi observed him for a few moments and sighed. You've seen some hard things, Sarutobi murmured. It wasn't a question, so Naruto didn't answer. You've just experienced the darkness of this world, Sarutobi continued quietly. While the formation of the 5 great villages has imposed some semblance of order on these lands, there are still horrors from the age of the clan wars, and even from the time of the great samurai wars, that linger within this world. Yes, sir, Naruto said when it was apparent that the Hokage wouldn't speak. The young Anbu's voice was rather dull. Sarutobi eyes him with something akin to sympathy. Be careful, Naruto, he cautioned quietly. Those who cling to their masks for too long find themselves unable to take them off. Yes, sir, Naruto acknowledged quietly. He took a deep breath, and tried to bring up his feelings, but the pain and anguish bubbled to the surface and threatened to overwhelm him, and he quickly shoved it all back down again. It will take time, and you will have time to recover, the Hokage said quietly. He steepled his fingers together. Now, tell me more about these mercenaries. Naruto gave a clinical description of the appearance and abilities of the bounty hunters that had worn those black cloaks and red, puffy emblems. The Hokage nodded, making noises in the back of his throat. Elaborate on the Code 2A in your report, Sarutobi said after a few moments. What information was so sensitive that I had to hide it from the Fire Lord himself? During the fight, one of the mercenaries' hats slipped and I got a glimpse of her, Naruto elaborated quietly. It was only a quick look, but her abilities match her appearance. I think the woman was the mummy. Sarutobi exhaled rather noisily. The mummy, he murmured. The S-ranked missing nin from the village hidden in sand, Pakura of the Scorch release. Are you sure? Yes, sir, Naruto answered stiffly. This complicates things, Sarutobi murmured. The Wind Lord would not take the hiring of one of their most infamous traitors lightly. What has the Fire Lord done? Sir, Naruto hesitated. He wondered if it was any of his business, but the sight of those cloaks had stirred something within him. What do we know about this mercenary group? Only that the Earth Lord has previously referred their services to the Fire Lord on past occasions, Sarutobi answered. There was technically no need for Naruto to receive this information, but the Hokage seemed to have no problem in revealing what he knew. They provide shinobi services at very good rates, and they have an excellent mission completion history. What are they called? Sarutobi-eyed Naruto. I believe they refer to themselves as the Akatsuki. The moon was suspended in the night sky, the stars twinkling behind it as they bathed a soft, pale light upon the lands. Deep within the forests of the land of fire, a bloodied mess was thrown to the ground with a loud thud. A dark figure loomed over it, wearing a black cloak, decorated with red swirling patterns. Two pale, glowing green eyes peered down upon the mangled mess that twitched and quivered on the ground. Trailing behind the man were three odd apparitions, swirling masses of black and gray wires and threads held together by ceramic masks, almost reminiscent of what the various Anbu organizations wore. They floated around the figure, ignoring their two fallen counterparts, which had been scattered over the battlefield in a spray of debris and cracked, white shards. Behind them, the woman, Pakura of the Scorch Release, idly kicked a corpse and watched dispassionately as flesh and bone flash burned, shriveling and becoming brittle. The lead figure, Kakazu, held a ring to his forehead and appeared to be concentrating. Then, he lowered his hand and regarded the gasping, heaving remains of Hidden impassively. The aftermath of Team Cage's encounter with the Hidden and the cult of Jashin was felt by many in Konoha. The Fire Lord had been understandably upset with the events that had occurred, especially given that his own flesh and blood had been harmed within the very borders of the Land of Fire. Almost overnight, an entire division of shinobi, most who had been on reconstruction duty, had departed from the village. They headed northeast, towards the border of the Land of Hot Springs. This halted the rebuilding efforts of the village for about a week, until companies from all across the Land of Fire were withdrawn back into the village. With one division securing the wreckage of the Sky Country fleet and a division securing the northwestern border and the customary division of shinobi, the forces of Konoha were spread thin throughout the Land of Fire. Konoha's intelligence department were completely overworked, desperately feeding misinformation and blocking espionage attempts almost daily. It didn't help that, almost overnight, Konoha's Alpha Platoon and its 25 members, led by Kitsune, had vanished on their long-term S-rank assignment. Reserves had been activated and shinobi had been called from retirement. Despite the pressing need for all of Konoha's personnel to be on active duty, Naruto found himself on administrative leave for an entire week. It was something that he accepted gratefully. Although he didn't want to admit it to anybody, he had had trouble sleeping ever since the mission. Late at night, every time he closed his eyes all he could see were the panicked faces of the men, women and children he had failed to save. Above them loomed Hidden, his manic and crazed expression stirring something horrible within him. His nights were spent tossing and turning, his days were spent cracking open the cover to the deep well of emotions that he had suppressed. Naruto had taken to his emotional conditioning well, but perhaps too well. He had always had the capacity to feel, but during the course of missions and assignments he knew of the necessity to be a blank slate. Those emotions didn't just disappear into nothingness. Naruto did the mental equivalent of shoving them in the cupboard and closing the door, and there always came a time where he had to confront them. He had done so after the Blitz, but this occasion was worse. There had been some yells of frustration, many tears and a lot of despondent thoughts. He had trashed his room in a fit of rage at one point. Naruto wasn't quite sure what the Hokage and Konohamaru had thought about it, but neither of them gave any indication of having heard anything. Konohamaru remained oblivious to anything that wasn't in his little world of concerns, and the Hokage seemed content to let Naruto work things out on his own. At the end of the week, Naruto had calmed down a lot and was ready to take on some light duties. When the Hokage and Konohamaru had come down for breakfast, they had been greeted by 4 Narutos, 3 scrubbing down the kitchen as the 4th hastily attempted to make a meal for them. As usual, the Hokage's residence was an absolute mess and Naruto took comfort in the familiar work as he went through it from top to bottom. It kept him from thinking too hard. It kept him from thinking about Yuka, who was still in the care of the Yamanaka as they pieced together her fractured psyche. It kept him from thinking about Toa, who had undergone emergency surgery for 40 straight hours. It had only been the intervention of Tsunade herself that had kept the man from dying. It kept him from thinking about Daichi, who had been whisked behind the walls of the Hyuga compound. Nobody knew the Byakugan like the Hyuga, and they had assured the Hokage that Daichi could be healed. At the present moment, Naruto had taken on some light administrative duties at the mission assignment office. He wore a simple pair of black paints and a bright yellow shirt, a crimson Uzumaki spiral adorning the front. The office was quite frantic at the moment, and Naruto was completely in his element. Right, Send these down to the archives, Naruto ordered a Chunin messenger. The messenger, wearing the sash of the communications department, nodded as he took the proffered papers and disappeared in a near-perfect body flicker technique. What members of the communications department lacked in combat ability, they made it for it in speed. Naruto turned around, frowning as he considered the pile of papers on his desk. Around him, a squad of Chunin, led by a Jonin, appeared and Naruto looked up. Team Yuna, he called out. The female Jonin, a rather pretty woman in her 30s with purple eyes and long silver hair, sauntered over. She wore a modified flak vest, which seemed to expose more cleavage than what was probably necessary, and a long bang covered one of her eyes. She carried a large, coiled whip on her back and wore a pair of spiked gauntlets. Ferret, the Jonin called out. She grinned. They have you back on paperwork duty, do they? Naruto nodded. I like it, he told her honestly as the rest of her squad caught up. The three Chunin were all young males in their early 20s, and each wore a different colored bandana on their heads. Naruto's lips twitched. Yuna was a talented Jonin, easily deserving her a rank, but she was completely hopeless with names. When Yuna had been assigned a Genin squad, when Naruto had just been 2 years old, she had never been able to remember the names of her Genin. Instead, she had color-coded them, which they still wore to this day. Naruto still didn't know the names. How's the brother, Blue? Naruto asked as he flicked through the pile of papers in front of him. Out with a busted leg, Ferret-sama, the man wearing the blue bandana drawled. He rolled his eyes. Took a kunai to the kneecap in training and earned 3 days medical leave. Ouch, Naruto uttered with a sympathetic smile. Don't let him fool you, the man with the green bandana said. Blue was the one who had thrown the kunai. The man with the red bandana snickered, idly fiddling with a crimson thread that poked out of his vest. He pulled it out, revealing a senbon that span on a bit of wire, and neatly twirled it in his hands. I was just helping out his training, Blue protested. He looked flushed, embarrassed. I thought he was faster than he really was. Well, Naruto interjected before a fight could start. Here we are, Yuna. AB ranked mission all the way to Bird Country. You're off to the manufactorium. The weapons factory. Yuna arched an eyebrow as she took the scroll. She grimaced. Is it time for the negotiations again? Naruto nodded. You'll meet with the factory's sales representative in a week. Accommodation has already been supplied, and you can pick up your expense budget at the armory. Yuna nodded with a grimace, idly rubbing her elbow. Naruto knew she wasn't too happy. The manufactorium was perhaps the largest weapons factory in the elemental continent, the size of a hidden village nestled in between 4 mountains. They produced vast quantities of weapons, from kunai to siege equipment, at prices far superior to anything locally made. Every 3 years, the Land of Birds would host a summit and representatives from all over the elemental countries would come and bid on an exclusive contract. The last time, the Land of Earth had won it, and the higher-ups were determined not to let Iwa possess the contract for another 3 years. Have fun, Naruto called out as Team Yuna departed. And, please, don't go through the Land of Rain. You really don't want to run into the salamander. Yeah, Yuna called out. She waved over her shoulder and led her team out of the mission assignment office. Naruto turned back to his papers and began reviewing them again. Voices rose and fell around him, and he briefly looked up as one of the Chunin behind the desk was yelled at by a red-faced, rather portly man. A moment later, a stern-looking man dressed in a Jonin flak jacket appeared and led the aggrieved client away. Naruto looked down again, signed the papers and snapped his fingers. A messenger appeared, and he handed him a report from Wave Country. Department of Foreign Affairs, please, he instructed politely. The messenger disappeared in a flash of movement, and Naruto sighed. He adjusted his work and was ready to get into it when a shadow fell across his desk. He looked up, and saw 3 Jonin standing in front of him. They all wore flak jackets, and his eyes traveled to the insignia patched on the collar. Oh, he uttered in understand. Hang on. Naruto stood up and made his way through the office to the payment desk. The Chunin on duty nodded respectfully as Naruto came around and knelt down. On top of the payment desk was a slot, where money would be deposited after a successful payment. It led to a strong box just by the Chunin's feet, a thick, solid metal container that could take a grade 1 explosive note and come out untouched. Naruto inspected the box for a second, and then pressed the button. With a groan of movement, the box lifted and a wooden paling slid away, allowing it to rise up to the desk. Signature, please, the lead Jonin said as Naruto rose to his feet. The member of the treasury handed Naruto a clipboard, and Naruto quickly scrawled his name and identification number down. Then, he bit his thumb and pressed the digit down on the paper. It shuddered, and at the top left corner a green little dot appeared. The Jonin did the same and the same green dot appeared in the top right-hand corner. Naruto nodded and stood back as the Jonin hefted the heavy box and disappeared in a body flicker. Naruto made his way back to his desk and finished the last of his paperwork. Most of them were mission reports from successfully completed missions. There were additional scrolls, bound by blue twine, that signified action reports, that is, reports from missions where the shinobi had encountered combat. They were sent straight to the intelligence department, where a team of smarter people than Naruto would sift through them. More often than not, they were as straightforward as they seemed, but often they provided some insight into other issues. For example, an encounter with a criminal gang in Waterfall Country might signify that the crime rate was increasing, which could explain an increase in the presence of Iwa shinobi in the region if the natives had been hiring them for policing duties. All that was left of his work was a scroll bound together with a black thread. Naruto frowned, and picked it up. He didn't open it. It would have been a good way to get his hand blown off. It was time to sign off, anyway, so he may as well take the S-ranked report down to intelligence. Naruto appeared in a body flicker in a long, shadowed hallway. He felt his tattoo pulse for a moment and he confirmed his identity with the Anbu platoon on guard rotation. From the look of it, it was Epsilon platoon, led by Dog. He strolled past the guards and reached the door at the end. Opening it, Naruto stepped in and entered a vast chamber. Konoha's Department of Intelligence and Counterintelligence was located next to Anbu HQ underneath the Hokage's residence, and was highly guarded. This department dealt with matters related to national security, espionage and if necessary war. Railing and pathways had been bolted into the rock that surrounded the chamber, and in the middle of the room was a pit. A large-scale model of the elemental countries had been built, and it stretched out and encompassed the entire room. Wires were suspended across it and Naruto saw two shinobi hanging upside down as they adjusted a series of figurines on the model. With this model, and a proper flow from the communications department, intelligence was able to provide a realistic model of current troop deployments for all of the elemental countries and not just those from Konoha. As the shinobi hanging from the wires moved up a set of figurines, which represented a division, closer to the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Hot Springs, he also saw a similar massing from Kumo on the border of the Land of Lightning and the Land of Frost. Most of the figurines represented shinobis in the dozens, if not hundreds or thousands, but Naruto caught a glimpse of a unique figurine made in the image of a cat. The demon host of the two-tailed demon cat had also been posted to the border. Naruto strode past the model and jumped up to one of the railings on the other side of the room. He opened the door, nodding respectfully to the guard, and entered the office of Nara Shikaku, the Jonin commander. Shikaku's scarred visage glanced up at him. "Sir," Naruto greeted. "Uzumaki," Shikaku said with a yawn. His sharp eyes had already spotted the scroll, and he looked depressed. "More work," he sighed. Naruto nodded and passed over the S-ranked scroll off to him. Shikaku took it with a grimace and waved Naruto away. Naruto was quite happy to leave, and as it made his way outside he looked up at the sun. It was that time of the day again, time to visit the hospital. Konoha's hospital was located in Sector 3, quite close to Konoha's Research and Development Department, and had been classified as a high-priority location. There were several smaller clinics, and even another hospital all the way over in Sector 21, that was for more general use. The main hospital was mostly used for the shinobi population of the village, those who had been wounded in the course of duty. With the prevalence of bloodlines and the sheer wealth of genetic material available, it was necessary to keep a constant guard at the hospital. Since the blitz and the raising of the alert level, the guard had tightened to the point that, depending on which ward a shinobi was in, even relatives weren't able to visit. Luckily, Naruto had all the necessary security protocols to go wherever he pleased. It was given to him as his role as the Hokage's personal aide, even when it hadn't been absolutely necessary. He recalled an incident where Naruto had supposed to deliver a package to intelligence, and he'd been rebuffed, forcing the Hokage himself to get off his lazy bum and do the work himself. The blonde Anbu suppressed a smile and he walked inside the hospital, basking in the cool air. The best way to get anything done was to make the old man do it first, and then offer to do it yourself regardless of what permissions and dispensations you needed. Technically speaking, Naruto almost had full access to every department, and could have practically ran the village if he wanted to. Yo, ferret, a Jonin called out as Naruto walked into the stark white hallways towards his destination. Hey, Riku, greeted Naruto politely. The Jonin had his head completely wrapped up, and a cheerful brown eye peeked out from behind his bandages. What's with your head? Skynin explosive, Riku responded cheerfully. He shrugged lazily. Shrapnel took out my eye. They think they might be able to repair it, especially now that Tsunade is here. Oh, well, good luck, Naruto said sincerely. Thanks. The hallways and corridors of the hospital were deceptively confusing, and Naruto was certain that there was some kind of illusionary or sealing technique embedded in the walls. Unless you knew where you were going, it was quite possible to keep wandering the hallways until you were picked up by a security patrol. Naruto navigated his way out of the labyrinth, and he ran into perhaps the one person he didn't want to see. Oh, it's you, Tsunade said. Her eyebrows arched as she lowered a file in her hand, passing it over to one of the many white-cloaked figures surrounding her. She waved him away and something glinted in her eyes as she turned to face him. How are you, brat? I'm fine, Tsunade-sama, Naruto answered stiffly. He found that his shoulders had straightened and he clenched his fists. The last time he had seen this woman. Well, that's just great, Tsunade declared rather unconvincingly. She gave him a bland smile. I was just finishing up with your friends. Are you here to visit? Naruto nodded. I don't want to hear any loud noises if you go and see that Yamanaka girl, Tsunade told him strictly. Keep your voice down to a whisper and don't surprise her, she's finally starting to show a constant measure of coherence and I don't want you stuffing it up. Yes, Tsunade-sama, and keep your hands to yourself when you're visiting Toa. Tsunade frowned in irritation over some kind of memory. Honestly, the man had lacerations and stab wounds all over him, and that woman decided that strangling him was the best idea. Naruto winced. He had an idea of who exactly Tsunade was talking about. Komaki and Toa had an interesting relationship. Yes, ma'am, he replied dutifully. Tsunade smirked at his obedience. She reached over and mussed his hair, much to his annoyance. You're a good little boy, aren't you? She cooed. Naruto gritted his teeth and bore. The S-rank legend, who Naruto ironically discovered was known for holding a grudge, alternated between treating him like a piece of scum she had found on her shoes or a helpless, little boy. Both attitudes kind of pissed him off, but the memory of his smackdown was enough to make him hold his tongue. It was to his surprise that Tsunade kept her hand on his head, her face smoothing over. I remember the cult of Jashin, Tsunade said suddenly. Her face was impossible to read. I'd left by then, but there was a bit of a stir when they came out of the woodwork, especially when they were able to take down one of the cage even if it was 10,000 to 1. Even I had trouble against the third Raikage during the Second War. She trailed off, lost in memories, while Naruto started in surprise. The third Raikage was said to be the most powerful cage that Kumo had ever had, the one known as the sharpest spear and the strongest shield. A battle between a man of that caliber, and the Sannin deemed as the strongest close combat specialist in the history of the village hidden in Leaves Well, that was one he would have paid to see. Anyway, she cleared her throat and mussed his hair again. Good work, kid. Oh, Naruto almost stuttered and his cheeks suddenly felt a little warm. Thank you. Tsunade stared at him for a moment and her eyes flashed with something. She occasionally did that when he saw her, as if seemingly random cues were prompting old memories to the surface. Something flickered over her face and she sighed, settling with a soft smile. You are such a brat, she sighed. Just stay away from that cult, okay? If Naruto didn't know any better, she sounded rather concerned. Alpha Squadron has been assigned to the problem, he told her. Kitsune will take care of it. Ah, Kitsune, she savored the name. I've heard a lot about him. A lot of the Jonin think he's going to be a tie-in for the Hokage position one day. There are a lot of rumors that say he's close to reaching S rank. I wonder who he is. You don't know? Naruto asked in surprise. Tsunade smiled thinly. I'm not exactly kept in the loop, she said with a tad of bitterness. To be fair, Naruto thought, it wasn't as if she had proved to be totally reliable. Something must have shown on his face and Tsunade's smile was suddenly strained. Her eye twitched and Naruto gulped. I reckon it's almost time for another checkup, she practically purred, and the young elite Anbu agent who had taken on two hostile S-rank opponents within a month of each other backed away. Tsunade-sama. Somebody called from the other end of the hallway. Naruto acted when Tsunade had turned her head and promptly disappeared in a lightning-quick body flicker. He appeared a few hallways away, and let out a mournful sigh. After the events with the cult of Jashin, Tsunade had made it her personal business to attend to him as his medic. The experience had been unpleasant, and Naruto never ever wanted to suffer through one of her examinations again. There were times where he thought Tsunade was warming up to him. Then, there were times when he was convinced that she was absolutely pissed at him. As he felt the necklace of the first Hokage bounce on his chest underneath his shirt, he had to admit that at least she had a good reason. Naruto made his way through the ward, passing medic nins and other visitors, until he came to a door at the end. Plastering a smile on his face, he turned the knob and walked in. "You cheating bitch. You petty little asshole." "Ah," Naruto uttered, and two pairs of furious eyes swept towards him. Toa leaned back on his bed, his chest and arms bandaged up. Komaki sat on his lap, arms reaching down as she bunched up the scruff of Toa's gown. Their faces were crimson and flushed, full of emotion, and they were practically touching. In between them and scattered all over the floor was what seemed to be a deck of cards. "Hi," Naruto said after a few moments. He cleared his throat awkwardly, while Toa and Komaki practically froze in embarrassment. "I'll just go. Captain." Komaki and Toa both wailed. Naruto quickly shut the door, leaving the two Anbu operatives to themselves. Toa's eyes met Komaki's, who palmed her face and echoed the sentiments they were both feeling. Shit. A few minutes later, Naruto was still shaking his head wondrously at what he had just seen. Komaki and Toa were skilled shinobi, Naruto would never claim otherwise, but in his honest opinion the two were freaking crazy. Still, he couldn't help the smile that crossed his face, and it stayed there as he went to visit the next room. "Hey, Yuka," Naruto greeted quietly as he entered the room. Yuka lay back on her bed, her blonde hair unbound and spilled out around her. She looked up at him owlishly, and a tired smile and an expression of pleasure crossed her face. "Yo, Cap'n," she answered drowsily. "Feeling better?" Naruto asked, and he took a seat by her bed. Yuka nodded. "Still tired," she yawned. "They got me on these med thingies to help my mind not explode." "Not explode," Naruto repeated. "They used fancier words," Yuka admitted. "But it's basically that." She touched her head. Brain almost went boom. "Things are still a little hazy. They had to get creative and I'm pretty sure they've burned out a few neural pathways. They say I can still be a shinobi, though." Naruto beamed. "That's good," he said sincerely. "Yep," she replied. Her eyes blinked rapidly, as if she was trying to ward off sleep. "We can still working together, Cap'n Cutie and his blonde hottie." Naruto grinned, and then she reached out and touched his hand. "Cap'n?" she asked, her smile fading away. "Yeah." Yuka didn't reply, and Naruto waited until it appeared that she had fallen asleep. He carefully placed her hand back on the bed and stood up. As he stared down at her, he felt a surge of emotion. His chest tightened and once again he felt a great sense of relief and respite. Despite all of their injuries, despite everything that had happened, his team was okay. Naruto left the hospital in a much better mood, which was why he didn't immediately react when he bumped into Hatake Kakashi. The tall, lanky silver-haired man stood in the middle of the road, heedless of the men and women that walked past him. His one visible eye gave off a distinct impression of boredom, and he seemed extremely interested in the little orange book that he held in his hand. At first glance, the Jonin came off as extremely languid and unconcerned. However, while Naruto had never seen the man in live combat, he had had the opportunity to witness Kakashi's prowess during Anbu team exercises, and, from what he had seen, the silver-haired man had definitely earned his status as one of Konoha's most elite Jonin. Naruto raised a hand in greeting as he approached Kakashi. "Yo, Captain," he greeted cheerfully. "Oh." Kakashi's one good eye lifted up off of his book and crinkled up. "Hello, Naruto," he returned lazily. Naruto fell into step next to him as the Jonin turned back to his book. No more words were exchanged between them, and the young blonde Anbu narrowed his eyes. He moved extremely carefully, angling his head and trying to get a glimpse of the orange book. But, in a flash, Kakashi promptly snapped it shut. Naruto almost pouted. Ma, Kakashi drawled. He waggled his finger in Naruto's face. A young and innocent boy like you shouldn't be corrupted by such dirty material. Naruto scowled, and crossed his arms. It, he snapped, but with a wry smile. Brat, Kakashi returned. Naruto leveled a challenging look at him, but Kakashi seemed to be inspecting the edge of a kunai incredibly closely, and the blonde rolled his eyes. Asshole, he muttered. What was that? Kakashi asked, sounding distracted, and once again surprised by Naruto's presence. Naruto twitched and Kakashi's mask moved, almost as if the man was suppressing a smile. Then, Naruto couldn't hold it in any longer and he snorted. Kakashi chuckled, and patted Naruto on the top of the head. When Naruto had been assigned to Anbu, Kakashi had been assigned a part-time role as Naruto's instructor. In between his role and responsibilities as an Anbu captain, the silver-haired man had taken Naruto under his wing, and had engraved the basics of shinobi combat in the blonde's muscles and bones. When the third Hokage had received him, Naruto had completely passed the hellish basic training, and was ready for the god of shinobi's unique training regime. Naruto had been a child when he had been placed under Kakashi, and the childish, silly part of him had demanded to know what was under Kakashi's mask. The silver-haired man had quickly debased Naruto of that idea, so he had moved on to his second burning curiosity: what exactly did Kakashi read all of the time? Of course, at the time his reading wasn't exactly advanced, so he was mostly looking for pictures. But after basic training, Naruto had continued to run in Kakashi to the point that he suspected that the older Jonin was looking in on him, and he had made it his personal mission to find out what Kakashi was reading, something that the older Anbu had taken to like a game. Of course, Naruto had long since deciphered the title and contents of the book, but he was still determined to catch Kakashi off guard. Usually that involved some kind of hand-to-hand or a quick bout with a weapon, but the Hokage had stepped in the last time Naruto and Kakashi had gotten into a kunai fight in the middle of the street, and neither Anbu had been particularly happy with their punishment. The two shinobi, both bearing Anbu tattoos on their shoulders, relaxed on that busy street, and Naruto placed his hands on the back of his head. D rank. Naruto hazarded a guess after a few moments. MHM, Kakashi uttered from behind his book. Naruto nodded at that. A family shuffled past them, the wife rolling her eyes at the two shinobi obstructing the road. Boring. MHM. Naruto scratched his nose. Annoying. MHM, Kakashi murmured. He lifted his head. Especially the small one. Tell me about it, Naruto responded dryly. A dark look entered his eyes. I had to clean under his bed this morning. You don't want to know. Oh. Kakashi's book lowered, an unconscious habit that signified his rising interest, and he stared at Naruto keenly. You mean? Nope, Naruto said flatly. He whacked Kakashi's arm with the back of his hand. He's 8. Oh, Kakashi uttered and the book rose again. A few moments passed between them, the sound of busy Konoha in the afternoon floating by them. Then, Naruto sighed and lifted a hand in farewell. Well, I'll catch you, he began to say. He trailed off, and almost as one, both Naruto and Kakashi looked up. There was a blur of movement, and Naruto watched as the three genin appeared in front of Kakashi. There were two who looked about 12, the pink-haired girl Haruno Sakura, the stoic Uchiha Sasuke, while there was one who couldn't be more than 8, Sarutobi Konohamaru. Just the sight of him made Naruto twitch. Mission complete, Sasuke told Kakashi flatly. His eyes flickered to Naruto, and a brief look of surprise entered them. The Uchiha straightened, suddenly seeming a lot more interested in what was going on. Sakura nodded as well, as she greeted Naruto with a polite bow. Oi, Naruto! Konohamaru practically screamed. He took an aggrieved stance and leveled a finger at the blonde Anbu. What's the deal with the lunch you are? The young Sarutobi fell backwards from the force of the snap kick that Naruto had just delivered to him. The blonde Anbu lowered his leg, his eye twitching and his fists clenched. Despite the speed of the kick, all it had really done knocked the young boy back, and Konohamaru was on his feet in a second, his face slowly darkening. What was that for, you jerk? He yelled angrily, although the effect was ruined by the flush in his cheeks still round with baby fat and the pouting expression on his face. You little punk. Naruto growled between gritted teeth. In a flash, he had his hand on Konohamaru's head, and the young boy cried as Naruto rubbed his knuckles through his hair. Bring your dishes to the kitchen, you little brat. If I find another moldy plate under your bed again, he trailed off warningly. Ow, 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 Konohamaru yelped. The two were recipients to many stares from the people walking past them. A pair of well-dressed, elegant women tutted loudly and fanned themselves dramatically, but for the most the citizens of Konoha ignored what was a rather common spectacle. Konohamaru had picked up a lot of things from his grandfather, including the Hokage's hobby of picking on Naruto. However, unlike his grandfather, Konohamaru wasn't skilled enough to beat the crap out of Naruto, and there was something cathartic for Naruto to take his frustrations out on somebody who bore the Sarutobi blood. Now, Kakashi's voice rose above the din. Naruto huffed, but stopped, as the older Jonin snapped his book shut. I think that we're done for the day. He turned to his genin, and gave a short wave. Dismissed. Same time tomorrow, kids. The older Jonin was gone in a puff of smoke, leaving Naruto alone with the three genin. Konohamaru straightened, his eyes watery, and blew a raspberry at Naruto. Then he was gone in a flutter of blue scarf as Naruto raised his fist again, his eyes twitching. Sasuke-kun, did you want to? The girl, Sakura, began timidly. No. Sasuke's answer was short, sharp and to the point. Looking dejected, Sakura nodded and, with another bow to Naruto, left. Only Sasuke remained, the Uchiha eyeing Naruto stoically. The Anbu stared back for a few moments, noting the spark of curiosity in the other's eyes. Yep. Naruto prompted, with a raised eyebrow. Sasuke opened his mouth, and then hesitated. He snapped it shut, looking strangely tense, and put his hands in his pockets. Naruto's lips twitched, and he stretched his arms. You know, he began, looking up at the sky. I was just about to head down to the training grounds for some light training. Did you want to join me? Sasuke stilled. Eagerness flashed over his face, but the Uchiha masked it quickly. Sure. The raven-haired boy answered, with a forced air of nonchalance. Still, Naruto had to suppress a grin as the Uchiha practically skipped alongside of him. The training grounds of Konoha were, for the most part, located outside of the village walls, far away from the highways that led in and out of Konoha itself. Shielded by the massive trees of the Land of Fire, there were no less than 300 specifically designed fields available for use by Leaf Nin. They simulated many different environments, from the rocky, gritty slopes of the Land of Lightning to the murky, damp swamps of the Land of Water. There were, of course, restrictions on who could enter which training ground. Nobody wanted a genin accidentally getting his or her head blown off because they had strolled into the training ground of a squad of jonin, for example. Sasuke's rank as a genin meant that Naruto was restricted to where he could bring him. Luckily, there was a session available in Training Ground 24, and Naruto was able to book it for most of the afternoon. Training Ground 24 was based upon the Land of Tea, with a long, narrow strip of a flat, grassy area and a wider, forest environment. The two boys entered the clearing, and Naruto turned to Sasuke. Hand to hand, he offered. Sasuke nodded eagerly and, after a few stretches, settled in his stance. Naruto took note of it, noticing how the center of balance was quite fluid in the positioning of the Uchiha's arms, and then took a stance of his own. Then they fought. Naruto was immediately on the offensive, and he darted towards Sasuke. His hands lashed out only to be blocked again and again as Sasuke deftly parried and countered every single one of his strikes. All the while, the Uchiha kept his balance, and at the end of the series of blows, Naruto had to duck a spinning kick as Sasuke countered. Red gleamed in the Uchiha's eyes, and Naruto smiled. Then he was at it again. They sparred for at least 15 minutes. Naruto had the advantage of speed. He was much faster than Sasuke, but the Uchiha had very good form. The Uchiha counter fist was a very passive form, allowing one with superior observational skills to analyze and parry incoming attacks, before following up with their own. Sasuke didn't use a lot of offensive strikes, but the ones he did use were potentially debilitating. He aimed for the eyes and the throat, and went in for vulnerable spots like the kneecap and the elbow. Naruto was even caught by surprise in one instance as the Uchiha redirected the momentum of his strike back at him, and Sasuke's fist whizzed through his hair as Naruto was forced to duck. Nonetheless, Naruto was an A-rank shinobi, and Sasuke was still a genin, albeit a talented genin. Naruto pushed, and Sasuke struggled to keep up. After a while, they paused for a break. Naruto was breathing deeply but was otherwise fine, whereas Sasuke was panting, his hands on his knees as he stopped to take a breath. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he looked otherwise pleased. What forms do you use? Sasuke asked after a few moments. It's a mixture of several, Naruto replied. He scratched the back of his head. It's mostly a combination of stinging wasp and talon of the eagle, but there's some monkey first in there, mostly in the wide blows. Sasuke nodded. His breathing was getting steadier. You make thrusting motions with your hands, the Uchiha noted. He mimicked a few. Do you use weapons? That's the basis behind Talon of the Eagle. Naruto beamed, looking impressed. Nice catch. Sasuke shrugged. My eyes, he offered as way of an explanation. There wasn't any boasting behind his statement, just a matter of face statement. Yeah, I mostly use a kunai if I have to fight hand to hand. I'm not very good at it, actually, Naruto confessed. Sasuke's eyebrows rose. Relatively speaking. Naruto chuckled, scratching the back of his head. He shrugged. I don't have a lot of strength behind my blows, so it helps to have something to make my strikes hurt. Sasuke nodded thoughtfully. Then, he was silent for a few moments. While his face remained stoic, the other boy seemed to be wrestling with something. Naruto waited, but Sasuke seemed reluctant to say anything. Would you like to watch some of it with your Sharingan? The blonde offered generously. Sasuke jerked. Then, he nodded. Naruto went through several of the forms while Sasuke observed him. With the sun bearing down on him, and the cool wind that blew through the trees, it was quite relaxing. Sasuke's Sharingan, two tomo in one eye and one in the other, was centered on him. It's probably not going to help you with your form, Naruto called out as he went through the motions. It's a very offensive style, not like your defensive one, but it might help you recognize what an enemy is doing. Sasuke nodded, accepting Naruto's words. The blonde Anbu finished up after a few more minutes and stretched his arms. As Naruto was taking a drink, the red swelled out of Sasuke's eyes, and the Uchiha cleared his throat. Thank you, he said rather earnestly. I'm surprised you let me look. Naruto frowned, feeling puzzled. Why wouldn't I? Sasuke just shrugged, and Naruto rolled his eyes. He reached around and whacked Sasuke on the back of his head. The other boy started, and scowled. He suddenly looked more childlike as he rubbed his dark hair petulantly. We're both Leaf Nin, Naruto told him firmly. Sasuke jerked at that, staring at Naruto strangely. Someday, what I showed you here might save your life. Why wouldn't I let you copy it? Sasuke had a strange look on his face, but he stared at Naruto with gratitude. Anyway, Naruto continued cheerfully, clapping Sasuke on the back. Your hand-to-hand is pretty good, and I'm all excited now. Let's see what else you can do. Sasuke ran through his skill set while Naruto watched, occasionally nodding approvingly. The Uchiha had a wide array of techniques, mostly centered on tools and weapons, but there were a few fire-type techniques as well. Naruto watched as Sasuke demonstrated an innovative use of wires that bound a trunk of a tree and set it alight in seconds. All in all, Sasuke was a very solid basis, especially for a genin, and Naruto was impressed. Right, Naruto said with a grin. He pulled out kunai, the metal polished and gleaming. Let's see what you can do with one of these. Sasuke pulled out his own kunai and settled into defensive stance. Naruto smiled, holding his kunai in a backhand grip, and adjusted his arm. The sun shone down on the clearing, and Naruto used the polished side of his weapon to redirect it into Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke jerked back, and then Naruto struck. Metal clashed on metal as Naruto pushed against Sasuke. The other boy fell back, desperately trying to keep form against Naruto's superior speed and weapons use. Naruto, pressed up against the blade, gave a push and Sasuke staggered back. Move your feet like this. Naruto demonstrated, and watched as Sasuke's Sharingan following him obediently. The next time that Naruto pushed, Sasuke ground himself and pushed back. Sparks flew as the two blades pressed against each other, and Naruto nodded approvingly. Then, he lashed out with his other arm, and Sasuke went crashing to the ground. Watch my shoulders, not my hands, Naruto instructed gleefully. This was fun. Sasuke staggered up, and Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the boy's hands in a tiger sealed. Sasuke drew back, his chest swelling. Fire style. Great fireball technique. A stream of bright yellow flame shot out at Naruto, he finished his seals in an instant. Fire style. Fireball technique. He spat out a stream of fire of his own, carefully modulated as to not accidentally kill the other genin, and the two streams of fire crashed into each other. Smoke billowed into the air and the grass caught fire. There was a flash of movement, and suddenly a series of smaller streaks of fire shot through sizzling ball of flame. Naruto ducked and had to hastily parry a series of shuriken away with his kunai, but then he was suddenly caught in a loop of wire. The streaks of fire struck a tree behind him with a solid whack, and Naruto turned around with wide eyes. There had been shuriken hidden in the flames, tied together with wire, which had also been tied onto the shuriken he had just deflected. The wires wrapped around him, binding his arms. A second later, a hot stream of flames burst down the wires, and Naruto let out a shriek as he was enveloped in flame. On the other side of the clearing, Sasuke panted, but his Sharingan swirled victoriously. He dropped the spools of wire in his hands, breathing deeply. Naruto had been overconfident, and Sasuke had played on that overconfidence, luring the other boy into a trap. He was completely taken by surprise, however, when a hand clapped on his shoulder. That looked like it would have hurt. Sasuke's head jerked back, and Naruto grinned down at him. Then, Sasuke convulsed, and Naruto let go of his shoulder, allowing the Uchiha to drop to the ground. The blonde Anbu's palms crackled with tiny bolts of lightning-based chakra as he crouched down by Sasuke's side. That, Naruto began sternly, was a good replacement, but unfortunately, you replaced yourself right next to me. The Naruto hidden in the trees called out gleefully. Sasuke whirled around, shuriken flying through the air, and darted away from the trees. He was just in time, and a loud boom echoed throughout the clearing as the branch he had been standing on exploded. It fell from the trunk of the tree and crashed to the ground as Sasuke landed on the ground, using his hands to redistribute his balance and ending in a crouch. His hands flew. Fire style. Great fireball technique. He blew the ball of fire into the trees, and his Sharingan swirled as he caught sight of a dart of movement. Then, Naruto was in his face, pushing past his defenses and delivering a solid kick to his midsection. Sasuke wheezed, but kept his composure as he flipped back gracefully. More shuriken shot out from his palm, but Naruto batted them away. It did give Sasuke enough time to retreat to a clump of rocks on the far side of the clearing. Lightning release. Electromagnetic murder. A cascading wave of lightning tore through the ground and shattered the clumps of rocks apart. Sasuke shielded his face as the debris cut into him, and was unprepared for the devastating blow that Naruto delivered to his stomach a second later, but he hadn't been, and shattered pieces of wood fell to the ground where he had once stood. But then it was all over. Sasuke was very still as he felt the points of at least 5 kunai prick into his skin. He was surrounded by all sides, multiple copies of the grinning and cheerful expression of the Hokage's personal assistant. I yield, he said tightly. His assailants disappeared in puffs of smoke, and Sasuke adjusted himself. Well, that was fun, Naruto declared cheerfully. You're obviously a ninjutsu specialist, Sasuke observed tiredly. Still he looked content and allowed Naruto to pat him on the back and hand him a drink. I am, Naruto agreed. He smiled. Long-distance ninjutsu is my speciality. Sasuke nodded, taking deep gulps of his water. He finished the bottle off, and shook the sweat out of his head. Naruto watched him carefully. You push yourself hard, he noted neutrally. He paused. Itachi. Sasuke stilled. Then, after a few moments, he inclined his head just a fraction. You've got a long way to go, Naruto observed. Itachi was one of the best. Sasuke clenched his fists. I know, he said tightly. You seem upset, Naruto said quietly. I'm annoyed, Sasuke eventually replied. He looked away. Kakashi never, he sighed. I don't know, I don't feel. He trailed off. Today, here with you, was the first time I've felt challenged for a while. Kakashi's a good shinobi, but he's not pushing me how I want him to. We always focus on team exercises and formations. As he should be, Naruto admitted. He scratched his head as Sasuke scowled. Look, some genin might have some unique skills and talents, but generally speaking the average genin is equipped with the basic 3, some skill in hand-to-hand and weapons and the basics of team formations. The genin stage lets rookie shinobi get their teamwork in sync with their comrades, accustoms them to following orders and completing missions. You're not really meant to be learning advanced techniques just yet. But I'm better than that. Sasuke practically roared. His Sharingan spun in his eye, activated by his anger. Naruto stared at him steadily, and Sasuke flinched and lowered his head. When he looked up, his Sharingan was gone. I know I shouldn't say it, but I am. There's nothing special about Sakura, and Konohamaru, he hesitated, obviously aware of Naruto's station amongst the Sarutobi. He lacks determination. He's got no drive. He's clumsy and, he trailed off, looking emotionally exhausted. Naruto knew exactly what he was talking about. Konohamaru had received much of the similar training that Naruto had once begun with, but it had quickly become apparent that he had not inherited his grandfather's legendary chakra. Even so, it had been enough to make him a genin at the age of 8. Still, Naruto had to say that at the moment Konohamaru's biggest flaw was his lack of conviction. He didn't really think that the boy knew exactly why he was fighting. At that age, Naruto had. He became strong because the third Hokage told him to. It had been all he had needed. At that age, Sasuke had also found his motivation. He became strong so that he might strike down the one who had left him in that hellish pit of loneliness. For such a young child, it had definitely been enough to force Sasuke past his limits, again and again and again. Naruto took a seat next to him. They sat in silence for a few moments, before Naruto began speaking. I made a class a few months ago, just before the Blitz, he told Sasuke. Long story short, I somehow ended up working with a team of 5 others. They're good to A ranks and 3B ranks, but they're not as good as me. And that was probably true. During training sessions, Naruto was definitely one of the stronger members of the group. Of course, they all had their skills and strengths. Naruto's genjutsu was average at best, easily undone by a competent enemy, whereas Yuka's were much more potent. He couldn't match the tracking skills of Daichi, nor could produce medical chakra like Komaki, and Toa's seal-based weaponry was definitely out of his area of expertise. Despite that, and hopefully without arrogance, Naruto felt that he performed just a little bit better than all of them. His strengths outdid his weaknesses by a far margin. Of them all, Kage was probably the one closest to his level, a gap closer, who could get in his face and prevent him from making hand seals faster than Naruto could stop him. Those fast close combat specialists were the worst kind of opponent for a long-ranged specialist like Naruto. Sasuke listened attentively. But during the Blitz, we encountered an enemy that I wasn't as good as, Naruto continued. His bangs draped in front of his eyes, hiding them from view. He was terrifying, an S-ranked opponent, one of those monsters. Naruto leaned forward, staring at Sasuke intently. Sasuke, we won. He was stretching the truth just a tad, but Sasuke's eyes were wide. There were casualties, yeah, but our teamwork was superior, and in the end, our opponent was all alone, Naruto said, somewhat wistfully. Uzumaki Shino truly had been alone, despite his strength. There had been no third Hokage to drag him from his loneliness. You're good, Sasuke, Naruto continued, shaking those regretful thoughts out of his head. You really are. But, you don't seem to work well with others. He gave the Uchiha a smile, and clapped him on the back. You'll need to change that if you want to join Anbu. The Anbu, Sasuke repeated, somewhat stunned. Naruto frowned. I would have thought you'd have wanted to join Alpha Platoon, he explained. They're jerks, but they're very good. Why them? Sasuke questioned. Naruto smiled thinly. Because they have a priority S-ranked standing mission that you'd be interested in, he said grimly. He stared at the last of the Uchiha clan, the one who had been left his own pit of loneliness due to the actions of another. If Itachi shows up again, Alpha Platoon will be the ones sent after him, all of them. It's one of their standing S-ranked missions, the elimination of the traitor Uchiha Itachi. Really? There was a note of something that seemed like tentative wonder in Sasuke's voice. Naruto smiled softly. What? He asked. Did you think we'd forgotten about him? Sasuke looked abashed, and Naruto suddenly realized that yes, Uchiha Sasuke really had thought that Konoha had forgotten about the Uchiha clan massacre, and what Uchiha Itachi had done. Naruto placed his hand on Sasuke's shoulder. When you join Anbu, you join a family, he said in a low voice. Sasuke looked at the hand, suddenly seeming more vulnerable than Naruto had ever seen him before. When Itachi betrayed your clan, he also betrayed my family. Just like you, we also want revenge. Sasuke licked his lips. Alpha Platoon, he repeated strangely. They're the best, Naruto told him. They're a bunch of assholes, but they're very good. Kitsune is one of the strongest captains I know. Even if Naruto really didn't like the stoic man, he recognized his ability. You have the skill base for it, but you need to work on your ability to coordinate with others. If you can't work as part of a unit, they won't want you. Are you able to? Sasuke sounded tongue-tied. He was obviously not used to asking others for help. I've got no say in it at all, Naruto admitted. He frowned, biting his lip and considering things. Still, I personally think you'd be a good pick if you can get over this hang-up of yours. Sasuke nodded resolutely. Keep practicing, Sasuke, Naruto said, and he stood up. He smiled. I'm sure I'll see you soon. The blonde Anbu walked away, leaving the last, surviving, loyal member of the Uchiha clan to his thoughts. Personally, Naruto didn't know if there were any specific plans for Sasuke, but he was suddenly determined to bring him in. The Uchiha was skilled, but most importantly, he was stuck in that dark, horrible pit that Naruto had once lived in. He needed somebody to do what the third Hokage had done for Naruto, to bring him up and give him a purpose, and comrades, people to trust and fight with. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.